What's up, everybody? It's Greg with Delta, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming Dr. David Schreiner. Dr. Schreiner, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Greg, you have the best intro of any show I've ever seen in my life. I mean, my heart rate went right up to the roof as soon as I saw it. Huge props to you for putting that together. I love it.
I appreciate that. I get that a lot of people like, man, I feel like amped right now.
Let's go, man. Let's go.
Yeah, that's good. It gets you into state, right? It gets you into that peak state. Gets you into flow. So for those of you that don't know Dr. Schreiner, you're about to. I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation. So Dr. Schreiner is an inspiring and values-driven leader who strives every day to live up to his definition of leadership. For him, being a values-driven leader means living in the moment, continually learning, challenging existing practices, producing positive results, innovating to improve the lives of others, and loving unconditionally. His passion for improving himself, his family, his friends, his community, and the world is unparalleled. And he aims to be a missionary for excellent health and vibrant communities by spreading love through generosity and healing. Dr. Schreiner is a passionate advocate for rural hospitals, having spent most of his life in small towns and working with small communities. His research focuses on improving executive communication. In addition to his professional accomplishments, Dr. Schreiner is an accomplished athlete. He has completed 11 marathons and become an Ironman at Ironman, Wisconsin in 2004. His dedication to health and wellness extends far beyond his work and is a testament to his commitment to living a well-rounded life. Dr. Schreiner's leadership and contributions to his community have not gone unnoticed. He is a 2007 Dixon, Illinois Citizen of the Year and received a 2022 Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of St. Francis College of Business. He is a past member of the Board of Governors of the American College of Healthcare Executives and the past American Hospital Association Rural Health Task Force Chairman. His first book, Be the Best Part of Their Day, Supercharging Communication with Values-Driven Leadership, is available at Amazon and all major book sellers. And I will tell you, I just recently started this book because David sent it to me graciously in preparation of this podcast, but with the holidays, I didn't get to start reading it till Monday of this week. I'm about halfway through and I am loving it. So I'm excited to just jump in with all of this and talk leadership and just shoot the shit. So let's go.
Greg, you're very kind. And, I think our time's up. I got to trim down that intro a lot.
No, I like it. It's good.
We're fighting through all of that. But if we haven't lost everybody so far, you've got a reason to stay. Hang in there. I promise.
Definitely. Especially when after reading even half of your book, it's so full of applicable strategies. Right. Things that you can do. And I like how you also talk about how you implemented it into your life.
Well, for your leaders that are listening, I think that's what matters. And when I speak on the stage, Greg, one of the things that I do for my last slide is what are you going to commit to in the next 24 hours? Because otherwise it's just entertainment. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's okay being entertained, but I hope that I can give people some stories and some ideas that will positively contribute to the way that they interact with the people that matter to them the most. That's the goal of the book.
Yes, absolutely. And you can tell, I can tell just by reading, within the first chapter, it's very clear. So talk, how did you become a steward or a student of lifelong learning on the leadership journey?
Yeah, you had mentioned some of the things that I did on the sports side, Greg, and it's really about no small goals. And I think many of us that are in this space have that idea, right? We want to shoot for big things. Mm-hmm. And I've always been in some type of a training program, whether it's related to sports or academics or what it might be. But I found myself in a place in 2019, if I can share just a really quick story with you.
Oh, absolutely.
I was having lunch with a good friend of mine, and I shared with him that I just didn't feel like I was delivering in the role that I was in. I've been CEO of a small rural hospital. We have about 950 employees since 2011. So this was 8 years in. And our hospital was doing fine, Greg. I mean, our metrics were good. Our quality was good. Patient and employee satisfaction was high. We were doing well financially. But I just didn't feel like I was earning the role and the opportunity to be the CEO. And this gentleman had just finished a doctoral program in values-driven leadership. and he shared the curriculum with me. And I think it was a lot of what I was missing and what I wanted to do to show up in a way to serve my community and serve our organization better. And that took me off on a 3-year journey through the doctoral program. And my doctoral dissertation was the research that then led to this book, because nobody wants to read a dissertation. Like my dissertation chair and my mom read it, I think. I don't think anybody else on the planet. I wanted to make an airplane book, something that you could read in a 2-hour flight that would share some of the best learnings from that research over 3 years.
That's incredible. And I love your drive to excel, like the awareness you had in the moment that you're like, you know what? I feel like there's another level. I could be doing more, right?
I'm guessing so many people that are listening to your podcast have that same drive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's incumbent upon, a lot of people that are at a height of a field, right? And leadership, sales, sports, fitness, that competitive drive. And I talk a lot of times about leadership. I say that leaders are competitive in nature, right? Because they always want to strive to do better. They always want to strive to have their teams do better, to help people to become the better version of themselves. But you have to have that competitive spirit to strive for that, right?
I don't know too many effective leaders that don't have that level of competitiveness, and it's shown in many ways.
Yeah.
But it's there. There's got to be some kind of a fire burning in the belly, right, to get the things done, because it's not easy. No one said that leadership was for the weak.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So the process for distilling your PhD dissertation into a very readable, very like this no nonsense application, like guidebook on the different styles of leadership and effectively communicating as a leader, right? And lifting your team to new heights. How did that process go?
Well, what I found is, if I can go back and geek out just a little bit on the method, I think it helps to explain where the book came from, Greg. So through my dissertation, I had the opportunity to visit 5 of the best performing hospitals in the country. And I went into each of those hospitals and I interviewed their CEO, the chairman of their board of directors, the president of their medical staff, a vice president that reported to the CEO, and a staff person. So I did 25 interviews. I actually did 26 because one person couldn't decide which staff person to interview. So I did them both. So virtually, because this was in the middle of the pandemic, I couldn't actually physically go to the hospitals, but I was able to do these 26 interviews. And I found these 3 major themes that organically rose to the top. And underneath each of those 3 themes, there were 5 action items that leaders could put into place. So you have this total of 15 things that I saw, Greg, that if we can do 12 instead of 10, if we can do 6 instead of 5, then we interact in a more meaningful way. And I try to give examples in the book in each of those 15 species, so to speak, of how to do that, how to go into your workplace and do that to be more effective.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sure you'll probably want to break out some of these. Right now, I'm on the part where you talk about the different types of leadership when it comes to the principles of communications, chapter 3. So I just finished chapter 3. So where you talk about authentic leadership, you talk about servant leadership, and then positively energizing leadership. And then you jump into the secret sauce, the presencing. Is that what
Presencing, yes.
Presencing. There we go. Purposing, patterning. I knew I sounded weird when I said it. And promoting. And as I was reading this, the previous book that I just read, which I feel is serendipitous at this point, is a book by a psychologist that was how to effectively listen. And it was all about building better emotional relationships through more effective listening techniques, and how a lot of people feel that they listen very well, and it goes into the weeds of examples of like what people do and the different styles of listening, and there's different levels of listening. And as I read your book, as I'm reading your book, I'm like, dude, this is really common. There's it's a lot of similarities. I was like, I wonder if you read the same book.
Well, I love that, first of all, that you seek out that type of information and you drive yourself hard enough to do that. But the second idea in the book is around developing outstanding listening skills and practicing them regularly. It's hard work, right? It's
It
something
is.
that it's a muscle that we have to use to develop.
It
And
is.
and without giving intentional thought to that, I don't know that we can achieve the things that we want to.
Absolutely. And it really comes down to empathy and our ability to exercise empathy appropriately, right?
I think
Uh,
it begins with the idea of caring and
yeah,
empathy. And
yeah.
if I am so invested in you that I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next,
Mhm.
I'm listening to what you're saying. And I love a line that I heard about that is, I want to be interested and not interesting.
Yes,
I
yeah.
want to be
Which
interested and not
that
interesting.
you said in the book.
And then so many times we're trying to think about the next witty thing to say to show how much we know. When I
Yes.
think about asking great questions and listening intently to the person, that we can find out so much more about what's important to them.
And you realize that when you spend the time just asking questions and then empathizing with where they're at emotionally or just in that moment, right? Because there's a lot of different ways that you can emulate, or you can emulate where they're at, or you can show empathy. Instead of trying to like fix a situation or give advice or do whatever, and then change the topic back to something, or even relate it to yourself, like, oh yeah, I've been in a similar situation. It actually stops the empathy process. And what from reading that book, I realized I was like, man, I do that a lot. I do that a lot. Like, cause I'm always trying to help people. Cause they're like, they start talking and I'm like, dude, I know exactly where you're at. I've been there before. Let me help you. And I thought I was being helpful and empathetic, and I wasn't. I
Yeah,
was actually being, it was a negative, leadership trait that I had.
yeah. Can we unpack that a little bit? Because I
Let's
think
do it. Let's do it.
there's so many important things that you said there. How many times has my wife came to me and said, "I brought this to you, and I was not asking you to solve it. I was asking you to listen." Right? It
Yeah.
happens with partners, and it happens in the workplace as well. And I think one of the things that is really key to that, Greg, is I came up through my career and I was rewarded and I had additional opportunities because I was pretty good at fixing things.
Mhm.
We're rewarded for that as we move through our careers.
Yeah.
And then when you get to a certain place in leadership, in entrepreneurship, in sales, you get to the point where really you need to do more being than doing.
Mhm.
We get rewarded for that doing. But as we move up and we're at a different place in that organizational chart and in our relationships with others, that being becomes so important that we listen, we ask questions, and we allow people to use their own skills and talents to come to a better answer than I could give them. And it took me a really long time to understand that. I have to
Yeah.
remind myself frequently.
It comes from a place from within themselves, which empowers them,
Exactly.
right? It's
It's our answer. It's our solution.
exactly.
It's not going up to the mountain and carrying back a tablet that says, here's what I should do.
And to bring it back to what you're saying about being more interested instead of trying to be interesting, when you're more interested, you become more interesting to the person that you speak to. And a lot of times, one of the previous book I was reading, they were saying like a lot of times you'll find yourself in a conversation where you feel bored, right? And they're like, it's not that the conversation's boring, it's that you're boring. It's because you aren't taking the time to take your ego out of the conversation and actually open up your curiosity to try to find and be curious like that child, and ask questions and really dig in and find like all these different pieces within the conversation of the different emotions that are being felt or expressed by the person you're speaking with, and be interested, right? So if you find yourself bored in a conversation, it's probably not the person's boring, it's that you are.
That is so eloquently said. And how many times have we been thinking about the meeting 2 hours from now or 4 hours from now or the next meeting, and we're not locked in
Mhm.
the meeting that we're in right now? One of the things that I talk about in the book is my favorite part, one of my favorite parts of being in a rural hospital is I could have a 9 a.m. meeting with a Harvard trained surgeon and a 9:30 meeting with a person from our housekeeping team that has a GED. And both of those meetings could be a game changer for our organization and the way we treat our patients, your customers, and their family members.
Mhm.
And you get to go from one to the other. And I found that to me, to get that bucket filled up, it happens so much faster when I'm present and I'm listening intently and I'm asking great questions of the person that I'm with. I'm not thinking about the next meeting or the next day or the next week. And that to me has been one of the biggest learnings and changes in my life since that 2019 lunch. It makes me want to come into work every day and be excited about doing my job. And I lost that for a little while.
Yeah. That's a powerful, uh, 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 um, epiphany that you're having, right? That you went through. And even right now, so for those of you listening, because he's more intentional, and it's like the combined of what I said and like leading into what he was piggybacking off of, that was because he's more intentional and finding interest in the people that he's, no matter who they are, that they're an integral part to the overall mission of what he's trying to do, and that is impact as many lives as possible, and help as many people as possible, be a valued member of the community, right? Because of that, he enjoys what he does even more.
I think it creates new opportunities. I think
Yeah.
it extends careers. I think it builds businesses up to a place that they could not have otherwise gone.
Yeah.
And all of it really falls back on a philosophy of appreciative inquiry. Is that a term that you've heard very much, Greg, or that you've studied?
No, it's a term that I read in the book.
Can I give you the 15-second lowdown on what that
Yeah,
is?
do it. I love it.
It's been one of the most meaningful things in my life. And appreciative inquiry was developed by Dr. David Cooper-Ryder at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. And the idea behind it, as an individual or an organization, if we think about the time that we were succeeding on every level, we were just hitting it out of the park. What was going on in that moment? What was it about you? What was it about your organization? What was it about the successes that you were having and some of the challenges that you were having? Just to think in deep detail about what was the environment like when you were doing great. And then try to narrow that gap to close that bridge between where you might be today and where you have been. And then the key to all of it is dreaming about what that can be. So what might that be a year from now? Again, if you achieve every goal you have beyond your wildest dreams, let's dream about those things and let's see how we can narrow that gap to get there. It's called appreciative inquiry, and it's been fundamentally huge in my life in the way that I approach other people.
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier. You talked about it in the book, and we kind of briefly discussed it, but how have you used this not only in your professional life, but also in your personal life with your kids, with your wife?
I think it really is about how we meaningfully interact with the people that mean the most to us. And it's some of the same concepts. It's the idea that I want to be present. I want to put the phone away. I want to listen to what they're telling me, reserve judgment, reserve here's what you should or could do,
Mhm.
and listen and then ask great questions and understand more about what the topic is. I've had more than once when my son has said, "Oh, yeah, you're doing it again, right? This is part of your research." And that's okay because
Yeah.
he still feels that love and he feels the appreciation that I have and the interest that I have in what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think it works. It works at home and around the dinner table as much as it does around the boardroom.
Yeah. And how great is it that you can apply these same tactics, see them work in real life, and then feel the growth that you're having with your son, right? With your wife. And
Oh,
you
and
just kind of see that it's almost like brings joy to your life.
well, you mentioned earlier authentic leadership, and
Mhm.
how many of us feel pressure around the idea that we have to be one person in this space and somebody else in a different space, depending on what's going on. What
Mhm.
if we remove that? And we just say that if we lead from a place of love and we lead from a place of respect for the people that we interact with, it doesn't matter where I am. I want to bring that same energy and effort to every situation. And that's how we can get someone to go home that night and say, I had a chance to meet with Dave, and that was the best part of my day. That was really fun. If
Mhm.
we can make that happen once or twice a day, how do we change our workplaces? How do we change our community? How do we change our families? I think it can happen in a really important way.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And I can tell you, in the military, when I was in the military, I had the opportunity of working with alongside a lot of very great leaders that I met, a lot of different generals and high ranking officers that were very impactful in my leadership journey. And the ones that I felt that when I walked away, I was like, man, that's a stand-up dude. Like, I really like him. They didn't talk much. They asked me a lot of questions.
Oh, I love that.
They asked me a lot of questions. They got my opinions. And I mean, even who's the, like, across the world in history, who is renowned as one of the best leaders of all time? Is what? Jesus Christ. How many questions versus how many? Like, in the Bible, it's like he made 2 statements and like asked like 546 questions. It's the same concept. It's just, it's spending more time listening and asking questions in order to get people to think and go inward for the answers, or to be, all the answers, the power is all within them, right? But there's something special when I spent time with people that asked me a lot of questions, or they showed interest in me, or they understood where I was coming from. Man, I really liked that person. And they didn't come, they weren't I sat with a bunch of leaders that would come and just be like, Greg, this is what you got to do. Boom, 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 boom. And they had all the great things to say, and they were very intelligent. And I walked out of there being like, I guess, like, sure. But it wasn't, I didn't feel inspired coming out of that meeting, And so, for those of you listening, if you're at a leadership, or you're trying to grow as a leader, you're on that path, right? Don't feel that you have to go into every single situation with your team, even if, no matter what the size is, whether it's your leader of one, you're a dad, you're a husband, or you have a large team. You don't have to go into that meeting with all the answers and saying all the right things. You can make an impact on somebody just by doing exactly what Dr. Schreiner is saying.
If I can share a couple of quick points. First of all, thank you for your service. And I believe that many of the best leaders I've ever been privileged to work with come from the armed services and come from the training that they receive from our country. And thank you for that. It means a great deal to me. My dad's a Marine. My son-in-law was in the Army. And I just thank you, Greg. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for support.
One of the CEOs that I interviewed in the Midwest in Missouri, his vice president told me that when we walk into our executive huddle, so the CEO plus say 5 or 6 vice presidents, the more important the topic is, the more the leader sits back and lets everyone else in the room speak first. And that's what I thought of when you were describing what you did, Greg. It was that idea of, he doesn't come in and say, here's what we have and here's what we're going to do. He comes in and listens. He listens to the people that are closest to the work, and then collectively they come up with the best route. And that doesn't mean that everything is, we're going to raise our hands and have a democratic approach to what we're going to do here. And, it's 4-3, so we're going to do the 4. It just means that everybody leaves having known that they were heard. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. I think it's critical in teams. And of course, the CEO is in some cases obligated to make the final decision, and that's okay. But even if it didn't go the way that I recommended or the way that I wanted to go, at least I know that I had the opportunity to voice my thoughts, and they were heard in a really meaningful way. So
how great is that knowing that, like, you go into an organization and they may not always choose like, oh, your way is the best way, but it's like, hey, we value your opinion. And maybe they'll take a piece of it. Like, oh, that little piece is actually, that's the missing piece of the 99% I had solved. This is the 1% I was missing. We're going to,
isn't that such a big deal? Because I think so many times we think in analog, right? I won or I lost. It was right or it was left. It was yes or it was no. How many times is that really the case? Right? It's never. So why can't we take all of the best ideas and put those together and do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's there is a leadership lesson that I was taught. It was years ago, many, many years ago, that you reminded me of just now. But basically, this is a world-renowned leader. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. From Africa, I believe. And he talked about like how he learned to be a leader was he watched his dad, who was an old, like, kind of tribal leader. And he said every single meeting he would go in and he was the last person to speak. He never spoke. They would go around the room and everyone would speak before him. And at the end, he would say, hey, thank you for this. I understand what you all saying. You said this, boom, boom, boom. This is what I want to do. This is what I already came in knowing. This is what I think is the best plan, that he would piece together little pieces of every single one. And everyone really respected him. And so he took that and applied it as an adult to himself and as a leader. And I can't remember this guy's name. He's famous though.
When you think about that and you think about how many of your listeners are feeling that pressure that I have this huge decision setting in front of me and I have to make that in a vacuum. And that leadership is overwhelming, or that pressure is overwhelming.
Very overwhelming, yeah.
Right? It just, you can't sleep, you can't do anything but think about it. And what if you were to open that up and ask your trusted advisors, ask the members of your team that know the most about that? Is there a way to come together and solve that in a way that is better than you could ever think about doing?
Yeah. Now, in the inverse, let's say you were like, you know what? I don't have to make this in a vacuum. I'm going to go to my team and see what they think. But you go into that meeting, you go to the team meeting and say, hey guys, we got to make the decision. This is what I'm thinking already. This is everything that I've thought of. This is everything that I think we should do. What do you guys think? Which is a very common course of action that a lot of leaders would take. What do you think how do you think that would play out, Dr. Schreiner?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Not a big fan. And the reason that I'm not is because, and we've all been in the secondary position, right? Where we're not the leader. And I respect this person. I value her opinion. I want to make sure that I make her look good, right? If I report to you, my job is to make sure that you're successful.
Yes.
And so if you start with the scenario that you described, Greg, and I throw out there as a leader everything that I'm thinking, as the person in the room, now I have a choice of arguing with you, of trying to dispel some of the things that you said, or just blindly doing the bobblehead thing, and just agreeing with everything. And all three of those add absolutely nothing to the conversation. So why start there? Why start at the end? Let's start at the beginning and let's work through it. And, if I'm listening to this, I've got to believe there are some people that think, that's great, but we can't have a democratic process in everything we do. When a surgeon is in the OR, I don't want him to look around and do a vote to see where we cut.
Yeah.
Right. There are things that have to be done, and we get that. There are also times where we are forward thinking enough that we have time to really analyze the situation, and let's get as many great opinions and brilliant minds around that as we can.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And my opinion on this, I think what you just said is 100% spot on. And I knew you were going to say exactly spot on, but I've talked about that specific concept before on the podcast with other leadership podcasts that we've done. And it's just a good reminder for the listeners that, hey, look, which I used to make that same mistake too. When I was a young lieutenant, a young captain, I would come like, hey guys, this is the deal. This is what we're going to do. What do you guys think? Like, is this like, I was like, yeah, rock on, like good. And I never got any valuable feedback. But when I stopped and said, hey, here's the problem. What do you guys think the solution would be? I already have a 90% solution. And then I get that final 10% just from listening. And they have no idea that I came in with a 90% solution of what I wanted to do already. I don't even tell them that I have a 90% solution. I just say, hey, based on what you guys are saying, I think we should do this, but I like what you said and I like what you said. And I think that we should go ahead and implement those two. That will, complete this problem set. Let's go ahead and execute. The people that execute on that plan, because they felt like they had some ownership of the final decision, they're way more willing to go running and sprinting and getting it done, right? And then we can find out very quickly if that course of action is going to works well, or if we need to go back to the drawing board. But
yeah, how did you feel, Greg, when you were one of those two people that you pointed to and said, let's take what you said and let's take what you said?
Oh, 100. I felt great.
Awesome, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, that's what we want. We want to contribute. We want to contribute in a positive way. I love the way you described that.
And well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would say for any organization, I don't care how big or small you are. And this is my ultimate belief is you could be in any industry. If you're creating an organization, you have to have some kind of core values, a mission, and a vision statement for your company, right?
Yes.
And why not with the people you're starting? It could be you and a partner that you guys are going up together. It could be you and like a group of people, right? Or you already started the company yourself and you've hired some people and you're like, man, we really need to sit down and do our core values, like what we believe in. That's a perfect time to come in and say, hey guys, what do we believe in as a company? Like, what do we want to stand for? And just go around the room. You may have, I got these 10 core values of what I want to talk about, or like what I want the company to stand for. I want to see who matches with this. And I want to see what else is out there that I might agree with.
You said you read 3 chapters and you jumped ahead to chapter 10. And that's why I feel so blessed to have this time to talk to you about this. But one of the 15 components that I mentioned is to keep the focus on the mission and know the audience and be prepared. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what you just described. Keep it on the mission, establish the true north, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
Establish that true north. And every time you have those decisions, we have that mission statement on the boardroom wall of our hospital. And I can't tell you how many times a person from our board has pointed up to that mission and said, how does that influence this decision?
Yeah. And it really does. It helps the tactical decisions on the day to day. It helps them to guide them on that true north when you've had the larger strategic decisions as a group, kind of like how we discussed, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
It's so imperative, and then that's how you create a culture. That is how you create a culture within an organization, because then people start policing their own. Then people are like, hey, this isn't part of our core values, because they know.
How great does that feel, right?
Yeah.
We get to the point where they're policing their own. In our world, I work in a hospital. One of the things that we struggle with sometimes is physicians not finishing their medical record, not completing their documentation.
Mhm.
It's one thing for me to stand at the front of the room and talk about it, but it's way more powerful when their physician colleagues say, hey, get that shit done. Because if I see your patient in the ER and I don't have the value of your expertise, that's not a great situation for our patient, right?
Mhm.
So it's just anytime that we can self-police, it's so much more effective than top down.
It is. It is. And when you have a culture that you have cultivated that's taken time, right? This
Right.
is something that you have to implement, and you have to have forcing mechanisms within your meetings or within your conversations, even, right? Like if you have a conversation like you talked about it, and I want to say in chapter 3, where even the way that you get to work and how you people see you getting out of the car and you approaching and walking into the hospital and talking to people and actually being seen, right? That is can be a time that you emulate your core values,
I,
right?
I think those things matter. And I think the way that we show up, I know when I was a young CEO, I underestimated how much people looked at what I did and what I said,
Mm.
and maybe more what I did. I park as far away as I possibly can and walk in because I know that we have people that are coming in and out of the hospital every day. And, I come in and I'm pretty much here for the whole day. So, I jokingly say the more revenue you generate, the closer you get to park to the door. I'm an expense.
Yeah.
So get out there in the far part of the parking lot. But we've all heard the story about the CEO that parks in the handicap parking. And I don't think our society has any stomach for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it speaks volumes to who you are as a leader and what you value, that you value your people. Right.
Exactly.
And that's that servant leadership kicking in of the so I love it. I love it. So man, I feel like we could talk about this stuff all day, Dr. Schreiner. Um if anyone's listening and you wanted to give them a distilled, like, hey, here's some applicable things you can do in the next 24 hours to kind of to help you start the journey. If you're looking to start improving your leadership, you haven't really read many leadership books. It's just what you've seen or what you've experienced. What are some of those distilled focal points that you could give them that they could start practicing on right away?
Yeah. So here's a real quick one that I love, Greg, that you can put into place in the next 5 minutes. So my challenge to you would be when the next person comes up to speak with you, no matter what, don't say anything. No, yeah, I get it, nothing. You're not allowed to talk until they finish. And then ask 3 questions. Do it today. Do it in the next conversation you have. Listen without interrupting. If you can, it's best to get up in that 90 seconds, 2-minute place. Just let them go. and it's a little bit uncomfortable for them, and it's hugely uncomfortable for you.
Mhm.
But I want you to see what that feels like and try to see what that feels like for the person that you gave that space to express what they asked to express about. So listen first and then ask a minimum of 3 questions. And I would suggest that you'll leave with a different feeling, and so will they. So just try that. Try that today.
Does it matter what kind of questions they are?
Well, it does. And I think that they have to be questions that show that you were listening.
Mhm.
And they have to show that the questions have to be, they have to show that you respect and care for the person that you're asking the questions about. So it's okay to be a little, I guess, surface on the first question, but then dig a little bit, trying to find out not only what are they talking about and what is the outcome that they want, but invite them to dream. An example that I would use for that is I have the opportunity to meet with new KSP hospital employees in the first hour of their first day. It's new employee orientation. And the appreciative inquiry approach that I give them is, if we're sitting here 1 year from now and you just had the best year of your professional life, describe for me in detail what happened. And you lead people away from a deficit mentality to a place of abundance.
Mhm.
And I think the same thing can happen in those questions that you ask. Invite people to dream a little bit. If we had the best outcome for what you're describing to me, what would that look like?
Yeah. And if I could caveat, I would say make sure that the questions are open-ended and not closed-ended.
Oh, perfect. Not the yes, no.
Yeah, don't ask yes, no questions.
And don't solve it.
Yep.
That's the other rule. You're not solving anything.
Yep.
You're listening to understand.
Yep. Listening to understand. Yeah, which is empathy. And people confuse empathy and sympathy a lot of times.
Right.
And empathy is listening to understand. You don't have to agree or disagree with them. It's just I hear you, I see you.
And I love the way you adjusted that, the caveat that you added. You have to give them space.
Because then it's their answer, right? Instead of you giving a canned question that's like, do you feel this way, yes or no? It's like, well, they might feel, there's like a multitude. It's like, hey, that's a lot different than saying, what are you feeling about that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be the attorney in the courtroom asking leading questions, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if it ends with the word right, you probably didn't do it very well.
So I always tell people, ask questions that start with what and how that's the best way, right? I don't like asking questions with why, because why can come off as accusatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
If someone says something like the question you just said, and you that you started with, hey, you're here for a year from now, best possible outcome. What does that look like? Explain in detail. And they're like, bah, 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 bah. And you're like, well, why is that the most important thing to you? Like you latch on one thing. Okay, they talk about the amount of lives that they impacted, and also like they were able to get raises and get money, and they're making more money, right? And so you're like, okay, well, why is getting a raise most important to you? Instead, you say, how would getting that raise impact your life?
Oh, I love that. The
That's a
how
lot
question.
different.
It's a lot different. I agree. I completely agree.
So whereas if you said why, that person that you asked the question to, they might feel like, the boss doesn't like that I want to raise, and they might tailor their answer.
Right. Exactly. The other word that I would add to eliminate from your vocabulary in those situations is but.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because it negates everything that you just said.
Right. It's and.
Mm-hmm.
What can we put together? How can we bring these ideas together?
Yes.
As soon as the leader says but, now you're arguing.
Absolutely. So how long has your book been out, Dr. Schreiner?
It actually comes out January 16th.
Oh, so man, I got an advanced copy.
You have one of the very few advanced copies on the planet, Greg.
Nice.
And it's available on January 16th at your favorite bookstore, and it's available for pre-order before that on Amazon, and of course afterwards as well. And there is within the next few weeks, today you can do Kindle or a regular hard copy or soft cover book, and Audible will be available in the next few weeks as well.
Nice. So I've loved reading this so much. Okay, so this is going to be a special. I've never done this before, but I believe in this book, and so I believe in everything that Dr. Schreiner is trying to impact in terms of leadership, which is a near and dear to my heart. So anybody that wants a copy, that watches this and says, I want a copy of this book, then the first 10 people that go on and do a 5-star review on this specific episode, screenshot it and send it to my email. I will buy, with your address, I will buy you a copy.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's awesome, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the first 10 people. Okay. So my email is gbirch, BIRCH at deltafinanciallife.com altogether. So and it'll be in the show notes also. So do a 5-star review on this episode. What did you take away from the conversation between Dr. Schreiner and I? Screenshot that, send it to me an email with your address, and you can say, hey, am I one of the 10? And if you are, I'll say, yes, you are. Let's go. And then I will get you a copy and I'll have it sent to your house so that you can partake in this and you can start applying a lot of these strategies in order to improve your leadership. So
that's very kind of you, Greg. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm a big fan of anybody that's trying to impact the world by being better.
And Greg, one of the other pieces, if I can add to that I'm really excited about is I've been in our organization a really long time. It'll be 35 years in March. And a portion of the proceeds of every book and every speaking engagement and coaching engagement go to the KSP Hospital Foundation. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. And you're helping with that based on what you just did. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's the least I can do. It's the least I can do. So David, if anyone wants to learn more from you, they want to connect or you talk about coaching, speaking engagements. They're like, hey, you do speaking engagements. I'd like to see you on stage. What's the best place for them to connect with you on?
Yeah, a good place to start is my website. That is drdavidschreiner.com. So all one word.
Okay.
Also, drdavidschreiner@gmail.com is an email that you can reach me at. And I'm pretty responsive on those things to a fault. So I'd love to connect with your listeners. And if there's any way that I can help one person, that's really the goal of the entire project in the book.
Absolutely. And when it comes to leadership and just impacting people, right? Not to bring this to a religious place, but whenever we die, wherever we go, let's say we're at the pearly gates, I just want that when judgment day comes and it's that time that when God looks at me and says, hey, what did you do with your life? There's at least one person that says, hey, he helped me. If I could get one person to like raise their hand, like, man, he made an impact in my life, then hopefully that ripple effect can continue to go on and can make a positive impact overall.
Well, Greg, I like my chances of being there before you. I would be that dude over there with his hand waving up in the air. You have positively impacted my day. And I appreciate the work that you do, not only the service to our country, but also what you're doing in our leadership space and the ideas that you're giving people. It's really hard to quantify what that looks like on our planet, but I'm grateful for the work that you do.
I appreciate it, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. David, the last question I asked, which you probably already know, if you had the opportunity to sit with, learn from, break bread with any 3 individuals in history, alive or deceased, who would they be and why?
The first would be Jesus. That might be self-explanatory as far as the why. The second for me is I come from Ronald Reagan's hometown.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan even before all of the publicity and things that President Reagan got. He's always been a leader to me. And the third person for me, which is not a public figure, but my high school track coach was a person that led me to the place of positivity. And I'm fortunate enough now to still be able to connect with them on a fairly regular basis and soak in all of those positive vibes that he has. And those 3 people would be at the top of my list, Greg.
That's incredible that a high school coach is having that kind of impact. And just imagine how many other people he's had that impact on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if we used the word can't, we had to run.
Oh, man, I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Schreiner, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing your lessons and everything that you've learned, in this short time. And there's probably a lot more that you could share. We could probably talk about leadership for a very long time. And thank you so much for the advanced copy of the book. It's fantastic.
I appreciate the opportunity very much, Greg. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you do.
My pleasure. Thank you. For those of you watching, thank you so much for taking part in the Be the Difference podcast. If you watch it to now, then obviously you got value. And if you got value, then do me a favor. Share this content with somebody else that can also learn and grow from it. It helps David. It helps myself. It helps the show grow. And you might actually inspire somebody else to make a change in their leadership. You never know. Just taking 30 to 60 seconds of rate, review, subscribe, and sharing this content can make an impact. And it would mean the world to both Dr. Schreiner and myself. This has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you.